Jim, Carroll, Ralph Baber, psychology takeaway. You need a dose of the real. Life's absurd. We know the deal. Did you hear? Don't let it get you down. Turn that frown. Upside down, upside down, 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 upside.
Well, welcome to another show here. Ralph, hi.
Hi, and again today we're going to be talking about fear, not scary monster fear, not zombie apocalypse fear.
Oh, no? Why not?
Well, we could, but
Maybe closer to Halloween.
Yeah, maybe closer to Halloween.
Well, last week we were talking about the things that people are afraid of. And you had a list, and a number of them were things like mutilation, a horrible death. Then there were a couple of relationship.
Yeah, extinction, losing your family,
Yeah.
those sorts of things. Yeah.
And then
And
the old list had things like spiders and dogs and, again, getting sick, losing a friend. And we talked a little bit about, why that might be, because, for most of us, we really haven't experienced that level of fear. But you know something, Ralph? Fear can be a learned phenomenon.
I believe that, and I have at least one example in my own life, and I'm sure you do too. But the thing is, when we say a learned example, what we're really talking about is both learned fears and emotional conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
So when we say, oh, classical conditioning, yes, there's a stimulus and something happens and you learn to fear the stimulus.
Yeah. Well, we started with classical conditioning with Pavlov.
Yeah.
And he found that dogs who normally would not salivate at the sound of footsteps began to salivate when they heard the dog keeper's footsteps because they associated it with food, right?
Food, yeah.
Okay. So along comes John Watson at Johns Hopkins, along with his graduate assistant Rosalie Rayner, and they say, gee, I wonder if you can teach a dog to salivate by listening to footsteps, could we make somebody fearful? Because they'd already, they'd gone through we'd gone through a war. We'd seen people who were definitely affected by the ravages of war, and they were wondering if classical conditioning could explain this.
Now, refresh my memory on the date, Jim. This is between World War I and World War II. So in World War I, we called that fear that people brought home shell shock.
Right.
And in World War II, we started to use the term PTSD, post-traumatic
stress disorder.
Yeah. And that happened in Vietnam. It happened in the wars in the Mideast. People came home and they had all kinds of fears that they brought with them.
They went there without, they brought them back with.
Yeah.
Not the kind of souvenir that you want from, a foreign country, right?
Right.
Okay. So back to Watson and Rayner. I said, well, how will we do this? Well, we got to find somebody who's not fearful, right?
Okay.
Okay. And we're going to present some sort of a neutral stimulus, just to make sure that they don't freak out to the neutral stimulus. Then we're going to introduce some sort of an aversive stimulus and pair the neutral and the aversive and see what happens.
Okay.
Okay. So that's the research design. It wouldn't pass IRB committees at any university today, but conditions were a lot different back in the early part of the 20th century. Okay. So you have the setup, right, Ralph?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I just asked Alec, our technician, if he had any irrational fears, and he said no, he had a number of fears, but they all had rational reasons.
Mhm.
However unlikely they were, he could give a reason for
Mhm.
why he was afraid.
Yeah. Okay.
So, how would we find somebody who had no fears?
We'd probably use somebody who, hmm, I know, someone who is young.
How young?
Oh, let's say 12 or 13 months of age.
Okay, so we're talking here,
Oh,
if not a baby, at least an infant.
yeah, just at the toddler stage.
Okay.
And in fact, we've got some footage of this original experiment, if you could call it an experiment. And I will put it up under Learn More, and you can take a look at the footage. You'll see this kid. He's been called Little Albert for years, and he's kind of a cute little kid. And the neutral stimulus, something that does not frighten him, is a rat. It's a
Okay.
laboratory rat.
A white rat.
Yeah, they're just not very frightening.
And
And
by
he,
and large, white rats that, unless they have been exposed to other things, they're pretty friendly.
yeah. So this white rat was presented to little Albert, and it didn't phase him. Nothing at all. He was playing. If it wasn't exactly playing with him, but he was not upset by the white rat. So
Okay.
neutral stimulus, right?
Neutral stimulus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's bring on the aversive stimulus.
Okay.
What do you think we could use?
How about a great big bell or hitting something cast iron?
Like
Yeah.
that? Okay. Now, what do you think a kid would normally do when they heard something? No,
Well, if they could see it, they might
they're
wa-
hearing it.
they might watch it if they saw somebody hit it and say, "Okay, I can see how that sound is made." But if it happened behind them and they couldn't see it,
Well, might they be frightened?
oh yeah, they'd
Okay.
cry, I think.
Yeah, they would cry. And we see that happening to little Albert. So the neutral stimulus doesn't evoke anything. The uh, aversive stimulus, which later on we're going to call the learned stimulus, evokes crying.
Okay.
So let's bring, and now we've had the neutral stimulus paired with the aversive stimulus.
Right.
Okay, let's bring on just the neutral stimulus. Bring back the rat.
Okay.
Okay, and in the case of little Albert, he didn't like it. He was frightened by the white mouse that he had previously liked. Apparently so, right?
Yeah, he didn't he maybe reached out. I don't know that he actually got on film touching it, but he certainly wasn't afraid of it.
Right, but now he is.
Now he is.
Okay, and so is that the only thing that little Albert became frightened of?
Well, I think if
We're-
little Albert grows up, I
Well,
think
no.
he would become frightened of things that have hair.
Okay, so we're using this term generalization. He begins to be afraid of hairy things, things that have hair. And in the vignette that we'll put up, we see him being frightened of, just fur, just a random fur object. Watson with a Santa Claus mask on and a beard. Little Albert would probably be afraid of you, Ralph.
Probably, yeah,
and
because I've
me
got a
too.
big white
Big
beard.
white
Yeah.
beard, yep.
So, you say, okay, well, what have we learned from this? We've learned that you can condition people to be afraid.
Mm-hmm. So the fear is learned in one way. Fear is learned is the pairing of the neutral stimulus, i.e., the land of Vietnam, with the aversive stimulus,
Right.
getting shot.
Getting
at.
shot, yeah.
Mhm.
So the other thing, though, that people get conditioned to, although we don't usually think of this, is actually developing preferences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Somebody would say, "Well, I don't like shrimp. I don't like to eat shrimp." Well, probably they. Well, let me use the Garcia story, okay?
okay,
All right. Now, it's because this has to do with food preference,
right,
okay? Now we've got in either Montana or Wyoming, we have a lot of sheep. That's where they raise a lot of sheep. And they also, in Wyoming or Montana, have wolves.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what wolves like to eat?
Sheep.
Sheep. Okay. Now, down here in Michigan, if you had um, a ranch, you could put a fence around it and you keep your sheep safe. But up there in the wilds of Montana and Wyoming, they just let the sheep, run. And
Okay.
hey, guess what? Wolves are around and they see there's a snack coming my way. Grab the sheep, eat the sheep. Okay,
Right.
so no fence, no protection for the sheep, no shepherds. How do you keep sheep safe? Well, let's see if we can make the wolf afraid of sheep.
Okay.
Classical conditioning.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, there's an expression that I read once in a novel that is interesting. The writer called something that happened very strangely. She called it a sheep bitten wolf.
a sheep bitten wolf. Well,
Okay, well, sheep are not going to
but
bite wolves, but how could we do that? Well,
mhm.
suppose.
I know. We give the wolf something that makes the wolf sick.
Okay,
Just like some people will eat shrimp or shellfish, get sick because it's, maybe bad, and just avoid it, for the rest of their lives. So, how do we get a wolf to take the food, take the bait? Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to sacrifice a sheep here.
okay,
Okay, and the Garcia, the psychologist, then put some poison into the sheep carcass. So you got
okay.
a dead sheep and get wolves around, and what might they do? They don't even have to chase this sheep. It's
No,
just a snack waiting there for them. Okay,
yeah,
so the wolf eats the mutton, the sheep meat, and gets sick. Gets violently sick, and the wolf begins to avoid sheep. And it's kind of interesting to see in the film. I'm not sure I have a copy of that one, but I'll look for it. That the remaining sheep, the sheep who are now alive, when they sense the wolf is fearful, they begin to become aggressive and they sort of charge at the wolf. So they change their behavior also. But the wolf is now avoiding the sheep that had the poison. So
okay.
one
So, how
one
about other wolves? Because wolves are pack animals,
seem to generalize.
it seemed to
Hmm.
generalize. So, the wolves who didn't get poisoned also started
Seem
to learn to
to
avoid
avoid
sheep.
sheep. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Now,
in,
go ahead.
interesting.
Yeah. Now let's go back to little Albert.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got this kid, and in um, I guess for the last 100 years, we psychologists have scratched our heads and said, I wonder what happened to little Albert. I can
Well,
remember at Michigan State, we would talk about this in our learning lab. Oh, little Albert probably grew up to be a fearful adult, he probably isn't working as a furrier, probably avoids fur coats
yeah, yeah,
and other kinds of furry objects. Well, we really didn't know what happened to little Albert until about, 2010, 2020. No,
yeah.
2010, 2011. And there was a study, kind of a documentary that you can see about, the search for little Albert. And it was found that little Albert was probably named Albert Merritt,
Albert Merritt. Yeah,
and he was in the cemetery of Johns Hopkins University. His mom had worked at Johns Hopkins, and he died at about age 5 from meningitis or some sort of neurological
yeah.
disorder. Um, so the kid in the film, was didn't really look like he had a neurological condition. But for years, that was, hey, that's
Yeah.
the
And
solution. That's what happened to little Albert.
one of the things that Watson was soundly criticized for later on was using an impaired kid, using a kid without permission, uh, using a kid who never made it to a normal life.
Mm-hmm.
So you say to yourself, well, okay, now why did they call this kid Albert? Well, that was the one thing they got right. They gave the kid a pseudonym.
Mm-hmm.
So, Albert was not his name.
Okay. Yeah, it was something Merritt. I can't remember the first name.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is, so
Oh,
Albert Berger, who,
okay, folks, this is it. Ralph is going to give you the big reveal here now, because for all these years, the story of little Albert has been incorrect.
yeah,
And Ralph has found I think we should need a drum roll, the
the
correct solution.
correct story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing Albert Berger uh, was a son of one of the people who worked for the university hospital. He's the right age, blah, blah, blah. All the factors play out. And
The Burger
so,
or Barger?
Barger, Barger.
Barger, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So all the factors play out. He dies at 87 in
Aha.
2007. So he lives a long, normal life.
Okay.
And
So,
he is afraid. He is afraid,
of,
dislikes furry animals, fur coats, anything covered with hair.
yeah, I think he didn't like dogs,
He
right?
didn't like dogs.
Yeah.
So, but not to the point where if there was a dog in the room,
It wouldn't freak him out completely.
it wouldn't freak him out
He just
completely.
avoided these things.
And he'd say, "Oh, I have to leave. There's a
Mhm.
dog."
Mhm.
So he had, let's call it excessive dislike, but not total paranoia.
Right. So we have two things here. We do see that fear can be learned, and it can last for a long time in the case of Barger.
Yeah.
And
Now, there
what-
were two things about this. One is Watson and his assistant left the university before they deconditioned.
Mhm.
So there was no attempt to
Right.
make little Albert unafraid of anything with hair.
Yeah. Now
So-
that deconditioning did begin to occur, the technique, a few years later with, I think, Mary Close Jones as a psychologist, but too late for little Albert.
Right.
Okay.
So now the other thing that we have to look at, and I think this is maybe the most important lesson, is we found out about Barger in about 2010 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
He died in 2007, so he's
Mhm.
already dead, but people are still looking into this question. So here's the thing. In good science, you don't give up until you have the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
So people kept looking who was little Albert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And they
even though
didn't just say, oh, that's all settled science. We
Yeah.
don't need to worry
even though
about
it
that.
says right here, merit.
Yeah.
And you know what the big clue was? That the original little Albert, the one who's buried at Johns Hopkins, had, yes, a neurological problem, but he was also blind.
Ah,
And the kid who was in the videos was obviously not blind. He could see the stimulus, he could see the rats, he could see the Santa
And he
Claus
could-
mask.
and he could hear.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously he had both sets of senses.
Yeah. So it took a real work of detection to be able to say, hey, we've got it wrong in this particular case, but if we continue to do some work, we can get it right
Yeah.
in the long run.
Yeah.
And, we've talked, Ralph, about misinformation. And in psychology, we don't have a lot of misinformation, where we're actually trying to manipulate people to do one thing or another. I mean, Yeah, they're anyhow. But one of the things that psychology has done is to take some, I would call them myths, and expose them for what they are.
Yeah, deconstruct them, if you
Yeah.
will, to and the other thing, and this is kind of interesting in terms of modern science, is there are lots of sciences, oh, climate change, global warming, for example. Uh, a lot of people will say, this is settled science.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're a real scientist, you don't say, this is settled science. What you say is, this is the best we have now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is what
So,
we've got,
yeah,
and we're going to continue to look at it. So I guess we'd remind our viewers and our listeners to, when you do hear of, quote, scientific breakthroughs, whatever they are, um, they may very well be just that, but they may be, incomplete science also.
yeah,
Now, we're going to talk about a different kind of fear on our next show. We're going to talk about a fear that is not necessarily learned through conditioning, but it's a fear that does grip a lot of people. And we're going to call those fears phobias,
okay,
irrational fears.
yeah,
Fear of height, fear of water, fear of spiders. You fill in the blank. And we can see that some of that is going to be maybe directly observable. Maybe somebody did, in fact, get bitten by a dog at some point in time, and then
yeah,
they don't like dogs from now on. Maybe people have heard stories of arachnids, various kinds of spiders, and them with their venomous fangs. Uh, and we won't forget Garcia's generalization. It seems that the wolves that did not directly get sick from the sheep did, in fact, begin to avoid sheep.
okay,
Okay. Then we're going to take a look at one experiment that is just really interesting, Ralph. And we have talked about it in terms of implicit bias. And that is, what if something has happened in the past, not to you, not to your parents, not to your dad, not to your mom, maybe to grandma or grandpa. And all of a sudden, the things that frighten grandma and grandpa are now impinging upon you.
okay. So that would be kind of generational wisdom or generational fear.
Yeah. And there are a number of instances where we do see that. So you on for that one for next?
Sure,
Okay.
that'll be an interesting program, I
Yeah.
think.
And then we're going to talk about, you know, if you do have some fears, rational or irrational, whether it's fear of going over the Mackinac Bridge or fear of jumping out of an airplane or fear of going up into an airplane, uh, hey, we can, John Madden, remember him?
Hmm.
Yeah, didn't like to travel on airplanes. So CBS or NBC built him a great big bus so he could go across the country. If our bosses, Ralph, said to us, go down to Detroit Metro, catch a flight to California because you have to do something. And we said, no, I don't think so. I think I'll take a bus. We wouldn't be working, right?
No.
Now, last week I pushed the wrong button to get us out of here. So I'm going to try it again correctly. Okay.
Okay, sounds fine to me.
Okay. Until next time, this is
This is
Jim.
Ralph and Jim.
And Jim and Ralph and Jim, all four of us are here, saying, hey, keep your stick on the ice.
Because we're all in this
Together. Or maybe we should say, keep your soccer ball on the grass, right?
On the grass, yeah.
Okay.
Or in the net.